let me introduce you to one of the best horror stories I've ever read, which happens to look like this. Yep, that's an Angelfire site. A legacy from when most of the internet looked like it had been cobbled together in Microsoft Paint. The site in question is called Ted's Caving Site. And if you plan on reading this story, I heartily encourage you to go read it on the original website. I'll put a link in the description. You can find copies on various creepypasta archives, but they're just not as good. There's something about the slightly janky, lo-fi nature of the original site that actually makes it significantly more scary. Oh, and there's one other thing that really ramps up the fear factor as well, which is that this is a true story, or at least true up to a point. Ted's Caving Site is the work of Ted Hegeman, a caving enthusiast. It tells the story of a time that he and his friend B discovered an unexplored tunnel inside a popular cave system. That's already a pretty cool caving experience, but when it came time to write it up, Ted decided to have a little fun. He took his original 100% true caving journals and added a few little embellishments, with the end result of a story that sounds so authentic that you can't help but believe it, but which is also existentially terrifying. The first few pages are about as realistic as they come. The author, Ted, explains that he's drawing from his caving journal to put together the site, but that he's also adding some retrospective commentary in blue. He lays out the situation. He and his friend B have been exploring a cave system that they refer to only as the Mystery Cave. As experienced cavers, Mystery Cave isn't all that exciting to them, apart from one bit. Down in one of the lowest parts of the cave, there's a tiny little hole in the wall. They can feel a breeze coming through it, and that makes them think that maybe the hole opens out into a much wider cavern on the other side. If they can just widen up the hole enough to squeeze through, they'll have a brand new, unexplored cave system entirely to themselves. Here's a diagram Ted made of the situation. This is the hole, and this is the bit they need to widen out. It's followed by a narrow squeeze that Ted reckons they can wriggle their way through, but that looks so tight that he calls it Floyd's Tomb, after famously unfortunate cave explorer Floyd Collins, who got stuck in a cave and died after 17 agonizing days trapped underground. Personally, I would have picked a different name for an extremely narrow tunnel that I was planning on squeezing my way through. But maybe that's why I'm not a caver. Drilling out the hole is an arduous process. First, Ted and B have to bring all their gear down into the deepest part of the cave, including a few vertical sections where they had to lower the tools down on a rope, then climb down themselves. Once down there, they take turns using the drill and a hammer and chisel to chip away at the rock. It's a really, really slow process. Ted talks about how if they chip off a piece of rock bigger than a fingernail, it's cause for celebration. So far, so spooky. Spending hours in the pitch-black depths of a cave, drilling into an unexplored cavern is scary enough. But all the more so when you add in the fact that they keep hearing weird noises. One noise they hear is a kind of howl, which they figure is just the breeze rushing through the hole. The other noise is an odd, deep, rumbling sound, which they figure must be the sound of traffic rumbling past on a road somewhere above the cave system. Again, personally, any amount of howling or rumbling would be too much howling or rumbling for me if I was hanging out in a pitch-dark cave deep underground. But these guys are made of sterner stuff. In the next chapter of the story, Ted takes a moment to do some exposition. He fills in some details about Mystery Cave, including a detailed description of the climbs and squeezes and passageways you have to follow to get down to the holes that they're digging out. Particularly notable is this description of just how dark it can get inside this, or any, cave if you find yourself without a light source.
The depth of darkness recognized at this time is something that is rarely experienced outside a cave. Many first-time cavers erroneously declare that they have to hold their hand to within 2 or 3 inches of their face before they can see it. The truth is, the human eye is incapable of seeing in an absence of light. If they did not hear something coming toward them, they would feel it before they saw it. Complete and total dark. This exercise is a great way to remind people to take backup lighting.
It's parts like this that make the story feel so real. Even if you know nothing about caving, like me, you can tell the person writing the story does. The level of detail and the on-the-nose descriptions are just too real to be totally fiction. In the next chapter, Ted and Bea head back to the hole to continue the monotonous task of drilling it out. They're joined by Bea's dog, Whip, who they hope might be able to squeeze through ahead of them and act as a sort of forward scout. Whip is used to caving and normally loves exploring. But this time, as soon as they get close to the hole, she starts freaking out. Her hair stands on end, she shivers, she whimpers, and she won't go near the hole. So either Ted or Bea, whoever isn't drilling at the time, has to stay back and keep her company while the other goes to town with the drill. That's not the only scary thing that happens on this trip. In addition, Bea claims that he hears a new sound coming from the hole. A deep, rocky, grinding sound. And no sooner has he heard it than the breeze blowing through the hole comes to an abrupt end. A bit weird. But at this stage, the pair aren't too worried. It's all still a fun adventure as far as they're concerned, even if poor little Whip doesn't seem to agree. They come back again a few weeks later, this time leaving the dog at home. And this trip is mostly quite similar to the others they've been on. They haul their stuff down into the cave and take turns with the drill, patiently chipping away and enlarging the hole. Everything is just like normal, until suddenly, out of nowhere, we have one of the most terrifying incidents of the whole story. Ted is working the drill when suddenly he hears a deafening noise.
I stopped drilling and yanked my earplugs out just in time to hear the most terrible scream I have ever heard trail off and echo into the darkness of the cavern. I stared wide-eyed at the hole. For several moments I didn't move, nor did I breathe. I turned to look at Bea. Moments earlier he had been lying on the rope bag catching a nap. Now he was standing upright, mouth open with a look of concern on his face. I turned and looked into the hole again, half expecting to see a demon face staring back at me. Nothing was different in Floyd's tomb. I fixed my gaze on the back of the squeeze where the limits of my light reached. There was no motion, only darkness beyond the reaches of my light. In the complete silence that followed, I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Not another sound could be heard in the cave. Suddenly, I heard a scraping noise behind me and straightened up. I nearly knocked myself out, hitting my head on the overhang. It was just Bea moving to turn on his light, but I was so wired it nearly sent me to my grave. Bea spoke, and again I jumped. He said to get some rocks and put them into the hole. He explained that whatever animal had made that noise might be able to get through the hole. I immediately grabbed a few rocks and hoisted them through the opening. Using the handle of the sledgehammer, I slid the rocks as far back into the tunnel as I could reach, creating a wall between us and the other side. Since the squeeze is so small, it didn't take long. The entire time I was doing this, however, I was thinking that the noise certainly did not come from an animal. I don't know if Bea really thought it was, or if he was just trying to convince himself. I didn't say anything to him about what I thought.
After a while of listening and hearing nothing, the pair go back to work. But now, everything has changed. It's not a fun adventure anymore. There's an unease in the air. A weird tension. Something is lurking in there, although they currently don't entirely want to admit it. When they pack up the day, they're uneasy, tense. They spend the evening discussing possible explanations for the scream they heard. Truck brakes on the road far above. An animal. Rock screeching on rock. But really, it's extremely clear that the sound has rattled them. But once they're out of the hole, the pair convince themselves that it's nothing to worry about. They're scared, sure, but they're also laser focused on getting through the hole and finding out what's on the other side. So, back they go for another trip. And this time, they manage to widen it out enough that Ted can squeeze through. The picture supplies at this point are, I have to say, about the most claustrophobia-inducing things I've ever seen. But they're nothing to the descriptions. Reading Ted's account of squeezing into the tiny little tunnel, edging forward inch by painful inch, and even exhaling all the air from his lungs so he can wiggle forward that little bit further, only to breathe in and feel the rock pressing on his chest from above and below. It's enough to make me want to never look at a cave again in my life. But instead of taking up stamp collecting like any sensible human would after such an experience, Ted is instead filled with a renewed enthusiasm to get through. He and Bea come back, using an improvised scraping tool to carve out a few extra inches from the passage, and then Ted tries to squeeze through again. After a nauseatingly claustrophobic crawl, he's through to the other side, and he couldn't be happier about it. This is what they've been working towards for weeks now. This is what it's all been for. Their very own cave system. And from the look of the undisturbed crystal formations on the walls, Ted is the first person to set foot here in centuries. And that's not the only exciting thing, because as he explores this brand new tunnel, he finds markings on the walls, cave paintings, evidence that there must be another entrance somewhere, perhaps fallen in, that ancient people used once upon a time to access this forgotten subterranean network. High on his new discovery, Ted heads back through the squeeze to rendezvous with Bea. Both of them are basically just excited at this point, almost forgetting all the weird things that have happened and how unsettled they've been. All they want to do is come back and explore. Of course, it's risky. Bea can't quite fit, and Ted doesn't want to venture too deep on his own in case he gets into difficulties. So they make up their mind to find another caver who's tiny enough to fit through the squeeze, then come back again so that they can do a more in-depth explore. And that's exactly what they do. In the next chapter, the pair return to the cave with another caver who's referred to only as Jim. Jim's even smaller than Ted, and so he has no difficulty getting through the squeeze, and he's pretty excited about the whole thing. It's not clear how well they all know each other, but it is clear they're all avid cavers. And as far as Jim is concerned, getting an invite to poke around a previously unexplored cave system is a once-in-a-lifetime gift. However, no sooner have he and Ted got through the squeeze that Ted hits his head on the roof of the cave. Badly. There's a little bit of blood, and he starts feeling kind of woozy. And so, to be on the safe side, he decides he has to go back through the squeeze as soon as possible, just in case he has a concussion. Now, they brought Jim out here with the promise of a brand new cave system to explore, and both of them would feel pretty bad if they made him immediately turn around and leave. So Ted quickly briefs Jim on the layout of the tunnel before he goes back through the squeeze. Jim will explore on his own for a little while, without going any further than Ted has already gone, so as to be sure of not running into any unknown dangers. That way, Jim hasn't made the trip out there for nothing, and Ted can still play it safe with his head injury. So Ted goes back through the squeeze, flops out on the other side, and rests up with Bea, nursing his sore head. They're already talking about coming back another day once they're sure he's not concussed, when they see a light on the other side of the squeeze. It's Jim. He's coming back already. As a matter of fact, he's practically running back towards them. Jim flings his gear through and then hauls himself through the squeeze as fast as he can, giving himself a dozen cuts and scrapes in the process. He looks awful. Wide-eyed, terrified, pale as a ghost. He won't say a word about what happened on the other side of the squeeze. He just grabs his stuff and insists that they get out of there as soon as humanly possible. He's not okay, he says. They need to go now. So they do. They make it out of the cave system, and they drive home in tense silence. Bea and Ted try to question Jim, but he's not talking. He just shakes his head and tells them there's no way on earth he's going back. But you know who is going back to the cave? That's right, Bea and Ted. They're now dying to know what happened on the other side of the squeeze, and they're going to stop at nothing to find out. To take an aside for a moment, you know, in a lot of horror movies, there's a point where the protagonist makes a terrible decision. Like, they have a chance to cut and run, but instead they head right back into the serial killer's lair for no good reason. And you're sitting there, watching in disbelief, wondering what they could possibly be thinking. Well, that's kind of what we've got here. Except Ted makes a really quite eloquent case for why he and Bea decide to return to the cave. So eloquent that even though it's a totally crazy thing to do, it ends up being rather believable.
This cave represented to us the culmination of weeks of hard work, complete with an array of emotions, from fatigue to fear, anticipation to pain, from frustration to glory. To us, we were not standing on the brink of possible destruction, but rather honouring an unspoken commitment, much like a parent of a wayward child. We were not about to abandon our child out of fear of the unknown. Like it or not, this cave had become a part of us, and now we must see this adventure to its fruition. Additionally, verbose explanations aside, we were being eaten alive with curiosity. Despite the overwhelming number of unexplained occurrences we experienced, we had to go back into this cave. What was making the rumbling noise? What caused the change in wind strength, etc., etc., all the way down to Joe? What could have possibly happened to him? What did he see or experience? We had many lengthy discussions about what our next move would be. We kept coming to the same conclusion. We had to return to the cave. We could offer no possible scenarios that would solve the many riddles held deep within the cave. The only way we could hope to complete the puzzle would be to conquer the cave. We were going back to Mystery Cave.
So while I definitely wouldn't have gone back, I'm sold on the idea that someone like Ted and someone like Bea would. Anyhow, back they go, and this time they're prepared. They take a video camera and a battery-powered telephone system that they borrowed from a local caving group. They get down into the depths of Mystery Cave, and Ted gears up and gets through the squeeze. He ventures off into the unknown, checking in with Bea using the phone, and documenting everything he sees using the video camera. And tense though it is, it all seems like a grand adventure. Until, quite suddenly, it all goes terribly wrong. Ted has gotten quite a way down the brand new unexplored passage when he hears a sound. A grinding sound. A sound like rock moving against rock. And what's more, the sound comes from behind him, from the empty passage that he's just walked through. How can there be something behind him? It's impossible. He's so shocked that he jumps and accidentally smashes his helmet light against the roof of the cave. He's plunged into darkness and has to rely on his backup glow sticks to find his way home. Worse still, the phone line is now dead. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know what's happened, but the line is dead, and his only choice is to now creep back the way he came, towards whatever made that rocky grinding noise, until he reaches that terrible claustrophobic squeeze once more. So Ted turns back, and he painstakingly makes his way towards the squeeze, towards safety, towards his friend on the other side of the squeeze, until he comes across something that makes his blood run cold. He comes across a rock. A distinctive, round boulder that used to sit on one side of the tunnel and is now sitting on the other. A boulder that has rolled across and obliterated the wire for his phone line, and, more to the point, has revealed an ominous, darkened side tunnel descending into pitch blackness. The implication is obvious. Ted has come exploring into the unknown, and then behind him, a passageway that was previously sealed has opened. And what could be in that passageway? What lurks down that darkened hole? Ted has no idea, but thinking about the strange noises he's heard, the grinding, the rumbling, the screams, the way Whip the dog refused to go near the squeeze, the way their friend Jim refused to talk about what he's seen, he's certain, absolutely certain, that something is, or perhaps already has, come crawling up out of that newly opened hole. In that moment, Ted is overwhelmed by panic. Alone, down there in the dark, separated from safety by the squeeze, he loses it, freaks out completely, and does the only thing he can think to do. He makes a break for it. Imagine for a moment trying to run away from a nightmare monstrosity. Now imagine trying to do that in almost complete darkness. Now imagine trying to do that through a rocky passageway that is so narrow that you have to exhale all the air from your lungs in order to fit through. Well, that's exactly where Ted finds himself. And worse still, as he's frantically worming his way through the squeeze, a strange odour fills the air, a rotting, stinking odour, an odour of death, an odour that emanates from whatever it is that follows behind him in the dark. With a superhuman effort, and scraping himself to pieces in the process, he pulls himself through. He loses the video camera, he abandons the telephone. He and Bee begin a desperate scramble back up the ropes and anchors they use to descend into the cave. The odour of death follows them the whole way, and as they reach the opening of the cave, the rope they've just climbed goes taut. Something, it seems, is climbing up after them. They waste no time in cutting the rope, and watch in horror as the cut end goes whizzing back into the cave, pulled by the weight of, well, they don't know what. They lay there in shocked silence for a moment, unable to process what just happened. And then finally, they pick themselves up and get out of there as fast as they possibly can. That's the climax of the story. There's a little more to it. After their experience in the cave, Ted is hounded by constant nightmares. He and Bee meet with Jim again and decide that they're going back to the cave, this time with weapons, to put an end to things once and for all. And then the story just ends. The last word is a hyperlink to the next page. But there is no next page. We never learn what happened to Ted and Jim and Bee, whether they conquered the cave or perished in it or went mad in the attempt. We'll never know. The cave remains a mystery, much like its name, as does the ending of this most creepy of horror stories. So that's the story of Ted the Caver, one of the first and most terrifying internet horror stories. A story that, as a matter of fact, was kind of pioneering. It kicked off practically the entire creepypasta genre of stories written in the first person that try and make you think they're true, despite their incredibly creepy contents. The author, Ted Hegeman, never wrote a sequel, although there's plenty of Ted the Caver lore out there. Someone made a movie. Someone else claimed they were the true authors. Rumours circulated that it was true, and other rumours circulated that it was a hoax. Caving enthusiasts tried to guess which cave the story was based on. It really was a foundational piece of fiction, and one that, we should acknowledge, somehow manages to remain as scary as it always was, even to this day. Oh, hey there! I hope you enjoyed this video. I've had a whale of a time sharing one of my favourite creepy stories with you, and I'd love to do some more in the future. If you'd like to watch them, it'd be super, super helpful if you'd like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so the algorithm knows you like my stuff. Thanks! And of course, bye!